Talking about Atiku's, well, response saying that he's not going anywhere. I'm sure that forms the bite of our conversation with Daniel Bwala this morning. Dr. Bwala, good morning. It's good to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Your should I say your principal yesterday talking about not going away. So let's see how you want to react to this issue. Many have thought that after the Supreme Court judgment, which I think we did say that after the judgment, if he loses, well, if they don't admit his new evidence, he might just let it go. But it will seem like he doesn't want to let that go. And some are saying he should just congratulate the president and say bye-bye to politics. Do you think he should do that?
So my response to individuals who hold that view would be to say that, so does it mean even in an election somebody is declared the president and the other is not, so the other candidate should just hold his hand and leave politics because the other person has been declared the president? Question number one. And number two, if you look at the population of Nigeria, the reaction of Nigeria, the 2023 election is a disgrace. I think everybody has concluded that majority of Nigerians, for many reasons, even the judgment of the Supreme Court is the law of the land, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to agree with it. The Supreme Court can make mistake. That's why in their ably celebrated dictum, they said that the Supreme Court is not final because it is infallible, but it is infallible because it is final. So in other words, that even the judgment of the Supreme Court can be wrong, but the reason why it is the law, because by our democracy, that is the final court of the land. And we have seen over the years where Supreme Court walk back on their previous judgments. That's why there is also the principle of law that says that the Supreme Court is not bound by its own previous decision. That means tomorrow, Supreme Court can change her mind on one fact. On all issues that the Supreme Court dealt with and arrive at the judgment that they arrive at, if you look at the jurisprudence of law in Nigeria, you would have seen a lot of decisions that also contradicted that. But that is what democracy has given to us, and that's what we work with, because democracy is not perfect. As for Atiku Abubakar, I know that if you look at the political space in Nigeria today, who else is a strong, viable opposition to this government other than Atiku in the whole of Nigeria? And do we just fold our hands and accept one-party state and one-party government so that the government can now be conveniently called as totalitarianism is authoritarianism? I used to have that problem with the pronunciation, So Atiku is young, he's virally strong. His idea of politics is yet to be celebrated in his capacity as the president of Nigeria. He clearly has a superior idea in terms of private sector driving. And let us not go far. The person who was declared as the president, since he took office from May till today, the economy has tanked. We actually have not moved an inch from where we were. What we have actually done is we have gone further backwards. Because if you look at May, where we're at, look at the value of Naira, look at the economic situation, look at transportation, inflation, cost of living, and all of that, and you compare that with now, inflation is about 23 or 25%. And the situation is critical. And so it's important that Nigeria continue to have this conversation around a viable option. And one thing about opposition is that the very fact of Atiku announcing he's not going away, but he's around, would also help the ruling government to strengthen her resolve in trying to do the right thing to the Nigerian people. Otherwise, there is an alternative. But because if there is no alternative, then that means that's the finality. Because effectively, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is ruling as the president at the moment, but he has his fangs on the neck of all political parties. And the only person that can give that viable opposition to him is Atiku. Remember the role that Wike is playing, who sold his party at like the way in the Bible they say somebody for the morsel of bread sold his destiny. This one sold his party for ministerial position. And now, does he have peace in his state? So we need a viable opposition looking to the next election. And I'm glad that Atiku has not retired because, quite frankly, If Atiku has said yesterday he's retiring, I might as well retire from PDP.
All right, let's look at the highlights of the things that he said and some of the commentaries. I mean, you quite put it that we are operating in democracy, and the ability to express one's notions freely is part of what democracy is about, and free participation. Even though I'm sure you've heard the response from the presidency, who said that if he has any ambition for presidency, that is outrightly doomed, and that was coming from the presidency this morning on leading newspapers. But he spoke about electoral reforms. He spoke about reforms for the judiciary, which were the highlights for some people, and looking at the issues of energy and, again, good governance. But let's start with the electoral reforms, with the outcome of what happened at the judiciary and the role or not the role that INEC played. How important is this, and how immediate should this be tackled? Because if we don't do this, we still have another round of elections coming, and that would also be the highlight of another conversation.
You know, all of the things he said about electoral reform, good governance, and the rest, I agree with them 100%. My only worry is that will the present government consciously and deliberately work towards reforming? If you look at our election history in Nigeria, you know that the elections in Nigeria have never been as bad as the way they ran in the 2023. Yaradua, when he was voting, told the Nigerian people, I admit that the process that brought me is a flawed process, but I promise I'm going to reform. He began the reform of the electoral process in Nigeria. What President Bola Ahmed Tinubu could have done is to tell Nigerians probably the same, or with Yaradua, to say that the process that brought me is flawed and fraud, but that since this is what destiny has decided, I want the Nigerian people to come behind me. Let us build towards strengthening the electoral process. Then he may begin to win the confidence of the Nigerian people, because one thing about life is when you admit a fact, half of the problem is solved. But when you live in denial, then the problem is not solved, and there is no way, there is no hope that you are likely to gain the trust of the people. Ordinarily, you would have thought that what Yaradua started, which President Goodluck Jonathan built on it, Buhari came and then signed the Electoral Act, which brought about the electronic transmission of results, and on IREP, which and the Beavers, which INEC religiously went all over the town saying that is what they are going to abide by. Had that been used, we will not have been crying today about fraud process, because you have taken away the human element. Once the results are tabulated and uploaded to the IREB, nobody interferes with it. At every level, you have access to that. Even people will have access to it through the viewing portal. But what they did was that they brought technicality and took us back to where we were before the reform. In other words, the application of the electronic transmission of results was not even applied. And INEC was in the court, busy defending them. Imagine INEC that certified document to you, come to court again to deny the existence of those documents. I mean, there is no contradiction we have not seen in this election cycle. So we are hoping, and a person who benefited from a fraud process will naturally want to keep that in the status quo so as to benefit from it the second time. So whether President Tinubu will do a reform is what I have a great doubt about. And when you even have a National Assembly that is worse than any previous National Assembly in the history of Nigeria from 1999, then it becomes because in the Ninth Assembly, we criticized the Ninth Assembly and Senator Ahmed Lawal for being overstaffed, but at least he created a semblance of the checks and balance, where sometimes he would disagree with the executive, they would throw one or two banters, then he will go to the villa, they will resolve. Nigeria tend to say, okay, at least there is a seeming activity that suggests checks and balance. This one said, whatever comes from the executive, I will not even think twice, I will just approve it. And his own colleague in the same chamber said that the speed with which they approve bill is that the speed of light. He even fought with his majority leader. So where will the reform come? People went to be confirmed for appointment with all kinds of questionable credentials. They were given pass. In fact, when even a ministerial nominee collapsed, he was even prescribing a medical solution to resuscitating the man. See, we have never been as low as we are in the history of Nigeria.
Dr. Bwala, I mean, former vice president has run for election for 6 times, I'm sure, since he started running for office. And again, I hear him say that under great, discomfort, he also proposed the fact that the 8-year tenure for presidency should be aborted and, resolved to 6 years. Now, these are some of the recommendations he's making now from opposition. But then one would also ask, do we have to wait for elective positions to be able to enact change, to bring influence into the system, and to also hold leadership accountable, being a forerunner of the political party PDP as well? What are the expectations Nigerians can have of him as a strong opposition leader from now on?
So, good. That's a very valid question. And my answer would be that usually the role of the opposition in government is not necessarily to antagonize the governing party or to create a chaos in the country. And I like the fact that Atiku Abubakar is leading. Throughout the campaign, Atiku has demonstrated this, what we call the statesmanship. This is somebody I talk with every now and then during the campaign and after the campaign, and who maintained the position that the campaign should be run without insult, without denigration. Whom, after the election, when people were threatening to go to the street, he said, no, stay calm. Let's have confidence in the judicial process. Atiku helped in stabilizing this election in 2023. Were it not for the presence of Atiku Abubakar, probably the situation would have been different in Nigeria today. And so he should be celebrated for that. In terms of being an opposition going forward, the role of the opposition is to provide alternative, right? To critique and interrogate the policies of the governing party, and where the policies in the opposition's consideration is not good for Nigeria, they will open, they air it out. They will talk about better alternative. Like, for example, we have an alternative to what they call the removal of subsidy that has plunged us into problem. So the role of the opposition is to tell the Nigerian people this is how it should be done. And then, of course, when they now say they are floating the naira, and the naira now is doing chiki chaka in the economy, probably by December, the naira to a dollar will be 2,000, God forbid. And we had an alternative to it. And both, if you look at the floating of the naira and the removal of subsidy, we've always maintained you have to set infrastructural policies in place that will cushion the effect of the impact. If you float the naira and it is not backed up by manufacturing, it's not backed up by goods, it's not backed up by production, it's not backed up by anything, then definitely the naira will go down. So if you intend to float it, why don't you start by putting this infrastructure in place so that by the time you float the naira is being supported. The same thing with oil, fuel subsidy. When they say they removed it, have they not gone back to it? So this flip-flop policies that is taking us into the abysmal, chaotic situation is what the opposition would always provide alternative to. We only have one fear, my sister, and I said it before. When they try to stifle the opposition and use all manner of the machinery of the state to threaten opposition for arrest and all of that, they are in fact creating the scenario for the unscrupulous element in our polity to create the chaotic situation. Democracy thrives when the majority rule, the minorities' voices are heard and protected, and the Nigerian people are given the freedom to express themselves. Then you create the environment for democracy to grow. Institutions of the state must be strengthened and allowed to operate independently. As of today, there is no suggestion that there is an independence of the functioning of the institutions of the state.
All right. Dr. Bwala, talking about independence of the institutions, of course, he actually expressed disappointment in the judiciary from all his statements yesterday. And he did say the fact that judges are no longer appointed based on merit, but are products of the interplay of politics and nepotism. And then two critical institutions he talked about, that is INEC and, of course, the judiciary, the judges themselves who are appointed. But some would say that if the judgment, for instance, had gone the other way in favor of Atiku, probably he wouldn't be talking about these reforms at the moment. Is that the true position of things?
No, I don't think so. Because, in fact, that is what he intends once he's elected as the president to commence this reform process, so that our own democratic institutions will function as though they are independent institutions of the state. You see, what distinguishes democracy and authoritarianism is that under authoritarianism, it is an individual that is the most powerful person and not institutions. So he caught the calls based on his feelings and based on his intuitions. But in a democratic society, It is the institutions of the state. When you see the rise of populism all over the world, it is a popular opinion that is anti-institutional framework, to go back to what they call the authoritarianism, where one man will be seen as the all-powerful. What Atiku plans to do, which was clearly spelled out in our manifesto, and he discussed that throughout the campaign, is to create an institution that would function without executive interference, because most of the institutions of the state are under the executive branch. So if there is no conscious effort on the part of the government in power to allow those institutions to function, look at the EFCC, for example. The person who was appointed as the EFCC chairman, we pointed out to the governing party that he does not qualify. Now, for whatever reason, they did not even listen to the Nigerian people they appointed him. What do you expect him to do there? To start with hunting people. So you look at other institutions of the state and see the way they function when there is that kind of interference, because they then leave you with this obligation of wanting to please them, because in the first place, you could not have even been qualified, but we just put you there. So strengthening the institution is allowing the institution to self-regulate themselves and to work. Now, talking about that reform with respect to the judicial system, you don't need to take the words of Atiku. You take the words of one of the justices themselves, who, while on retirement, in his valedictory speech, pointed out the inherent problems confronting the judiciary. So nobody is pointing fingers at the judiciary. Members of the judiciary are beginning to cry out on the inherent problems. Now, the governing party has the duty, if it so wishes, to begin the reform by ensuring that the Chief Justice of Nigeria does not have that authoritarian power. You democratize the power, being the chairman of almost about everything. That is one. Two, the elevation and the appointment of people into the judicial system as judicial officers, and the elevation into the experts board, that has to be looked into, so that it does not become a clannish, thing. Today, for you to be senior advocate or you to be to judge, you have to be the son of another senior advocate, or son of another judge, or son of another senior advocate judge. And this type of institutional building will, at the end of the day, build a clan rather than a country. And Atiku is saying that as a country, we cannot. You see, when you hear instability in a country, where they say the country right now is at a critical stage, is where institutions do not function. In America, the president will say one thing, the institution will disagree with him based on the modus operandi of that institution. In Nigeria, tell me one thing, the president will say that any institution will go against him. I just gave you even an example of a separate branch of government, not even under the executive, that is supposed to exercise
All right, Dr.
independence.
Bwala.
They are unable to do that.
Just before we let you scurry away with your thoughts, I mean, it's just a 60 seconds round for us to let you go. Maybe quickly you tell us, because I hear the Vice President, former, say that the continuation of the struggle is left to the young people. But the young people, well, I'm sure you get feelers of their resignation, their struggle with the disruptive democracy that we practice. Do you think that they have the energy and the flair to continue? Is the Vice President, the former for Nigeria, willing to also let them understand that they shouldn't lose trust in the planned Nigeria?
This is where I celebrate the fact of what the Vice President said, that he's not going anywhere, because quite frankly, had the Vice President said he's retiring, then there will be a complete loss of hope by the young people. There has never been a time where the young people demonstrated interest in the politics of Nigeria, both in terms of participation and their popular support, than now. So the next election cycle would have been an election cycle where nobody will have the enthusiasm to go and vote, because clearly your vote will not count. Either the INEC will be used by institution to go against you, or that the INEC will create a scenario that will make it easier for the court to deny the winner his victory. But he said he's standing strong and is going to be encouraging the young people not to give up. This is what we need. All over the world, there is a transfer of generational shift from the old to the young, so you can build a nation of young people. Africa has the highest population of young people, but it is only Africa the young people are not governing. The other countries of the world that have aging population and the youth are disappearing are those countries that youth are taking over their government. But in Africa, where you have the highest working population in the world now, is from Africa. Go to any part of the world and see the people driving their economy, both in medicine, in science and technology, in education, in all aspects. They're Africans. There is a shift. People are jabbering everywhere in Africa because the old people will not allow the young people in Africa to be able to deploy their skills and knowledge and better the continent of Africa. But it's about time. And I like the fact that Atiku says he's going to stand strong and encourage the thriving of these young people. And we will not give up in our
Indeed,
democracy. We
Dr.
will not.
Bwala,
We
indeed.
are going to stay fit.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us this morning to have this conversation. Candid and insightful, and do have yourself a lovely day.
Thank you.